Hey, Bastish B here for 64K and welcome to my new series, Shoot 'em Up Decades. So you're probably wondering, what is this new show going to be about? Okay, so on each episode I'm going to highlight 3 classic shoot 'em ups from 3 different decades. It's going to be chosen at random, whether 70s, 80s, 90s or the nows. It's meant to show the progression of the whole shoot 'em up genre. You get to see like ones from different decades and how they've changed, so that's the whole goal of this. If you like shoot 'em up games, classic horizontal, vertical scrolling shoot 'em ups, you're really going to like this show. So let's not waste any more time here, let's jump to our first game for today, and that's from 1987.
Zynaps by Houston was released in 1987 on the Commodore 64.
And as we just heard, Zynaps was released by the powerhouse UK software company at the time, Houston Consultants, who were a major player in the European 8 and 16-bit computer scenes at the time. They started making games in 1981 and closed their doors in 1991, but they are fondly remembered for producing some excellent games, mostly shoot 'em ups, that pushed the hardware of the time to the limit. Games such as Nebulous, Stormlord, Cybernoid 1 and 2, and Iridium were just a few of their gems. But Zynaps was wedged almost in the middle of their whole software cycle and is often overlooked due to the popularity of those titles. Zynaps is a classic styled horizontal shooter that ticks all the right cliches at the time, but does them all very well. Designed by John Cummings, who worked on many C64 classics such as Firelord, Soldier of Fortune, not to mention doing brilliant work on arcade conversions like Super Off-Road, Rainbow Island, and let's not forget Stunt Car Racer, the game was in good hands. Zynaps features 12 levels of relentless action that is going to really push any fan of the genre to the limit, to say the least. Hard is an understatement, but the more you play it, the easier it gets. Well, until you get to the next level, that is. The levels are generally pretty short, with a boss at the end of each of them, but if you die, you go all the way back to the beginning of the level. Yep, it's one of those games. So grab your most rubbish controller, because when you die, the odds are you're gonna smash that bastard up. The weapon system in the game is pretty cool. Collect the disc things to keep upgrading your ship's power or speed, but if you hold down the fire button while collecting them, you can switch to new weapon sets, including a guided missile, secondary weapon, or the green disc of death that randomly flies around the screen killing everything. Another cool thing about the game is that your ship actually has weight and inertia in space, and it affects it, so it floats about quite a bit. It feels pretty good after a couple of goes. I really like it. The graphics are nice and cartoony and are animated really well, and the variety in the enemies is quite significant. The levels look good too, although after about level 7 or so they all tend to look the same. The sound effects are really well done and have this nice chunky sound to them and makes it really satisfying when blowing things away. This game is also available on the C64 Mini with a whole bunch of other really cool Houston titles, so checking it out this way is probably the simplest if you haven't got an old 64 lying about. The Zap 64 magazine at the time gave this thing a whopping 90% in 1987, and although I like it, I think that's a bit much. Having said that, I'd still recommend giving this cool 80s shoot 'em up a try, especially if you've never played it before. Okay, for our next game we're going to jump ahead exactly 1 decade to 1997.
DoDon Pachi was released by Cave in 1997 on the Sega Saturn, and was Cave's second game release.
DoDon Pachi was converted to the Sega Saturn from the arcade. It was a direct sequel to the arcade original Don Pachi, which was also a brilliant shoot 'em up game. Game was published by Atlas, but programmed by those Japanese maniacs at Cave, one of the most well-known and respected shoot 'em up developers. They were formed in 1994 and comprised mostly of ex-Toplan employees, which itself was an arcade powerhouse company which went defunct in 1994. This may have only been Cave's second game, but damn did they get the bullet hell formula down so well. Later on they would go on to make classics like Pink Sweets, the Death Smile series, and Akai Katana, amongst many more fan favorites. But for now, let's jump back to the bullet hell masterpiece. Straight off the bat, you get to choose between either 2 jets or a helicopter. The one jet sports a narrow shot, the other a spread shot, while the chopper has 2 side attacks for extra death dealing. And of course, you always come equipped with a smart bomb for total screen destruction. And man, does this game dish out the destruction at a feverish pace. It's a relentless assault on the senses without a second to breathe, and it's just so damn satisfying. The game serves up 6 levels of mayhem, which doesn't sound like much, but it's actually the perfect amount for this style of game. If you've never heard the phrase a bullet hell shooter, then this game is a prime example of one, with a relentless stream of bullets that is constantly on screen and blowing the hell out of everything. DoDon Pachi, the prequel, is often cited as being the original bullet hell game. Cave couldn't have picked a more perfect system to release this game on as well, as the Saturn was known as a 2D powerhouse, and the game runs fantastically on the system. The graphics are chunky, but feel very robust, and the explosions and destruction is a treat for the eyes, as is the sound effects for the ears. The music is typical shooter fare for the time, and does the job fairly well, if nothing spectacular. And if you're feeling particularly skillful, there's a hidden 7th stage, but in order to open that, you have to complete the entire game with 1 credit. Good luck, soldier. And if you're a newbie to bullet hell games, fear not, because this Saturn version has a very easy, normal, and hard mode, so it's the perfect game to get used to this shoot 'em up subgenre. I'll definitely be covering more games from this series in the future, but for now, search this Japanese Saturn release out now. You won't regret it. And our final game for today was released in 2012.
Sine Mora was released by Grasshopper manufacturer in 2012 on the PC. Its original release was on the Xbox 360 a few months earlier.
Sine Mora was a shoot 'em up co-developed by 2 companies. One of them, Grasshopper Manufacturer, who you may know, is a Japanese company formed in 1998 by the head honcho, Suda51, and they are known for making some crazy cool games like Killer 7, No More Heroes, and Lollipop Chainsaw, to name a few. And the other company, which you may not know, Digital Reality. They were a Hungarian company formed in 1991 and probably are best known for making the PC strategy games Imperium Galactica 1 and 2, and they unfortunately closed their doors in 2013. So then how did these 2 companies manage to make such a brilliant shoot 'em up, especially considering this style of game was neither of their forte? The hell if I know. So let's just jump into this classic and start playing, and I'm sure it'll all be revealed. The first thing that strikes you about this game is the gorgeous 2.5D graphics that are absolutely stunning to look at. Every little detail in this crazy steampunk style universe is rendered to the highest quality. An unusual feature for this type of game is the story, which is dark to say the least, and involves genocide, persecution, revenge, and it's laid on thick. It's also told from multiple character perspectives, which also serves as the switching point for vehicles, giving slight variety in the gameplay from chapter to chapter. Just like in Zynaps earlier, the levels are not too long and culminate in a gigantic boss battles. And for me, these are the highlights of this awesome game. Giant mech submarines, fortress-like trains, and giant mechanized cannons are just a few of the examples. This game features another interesting element, which is the time feature, which has 2 parts to it. First, your energy is time, which is constantly ticking down. So every enemy you shoot down adds it back up, or vice versa. And the second time element is that you can slow down time to deal with mass bullet dodging and maneuvering sequences for limited periods. Both elements work exceptionally well and makes this game quite different from the previous 2 titles we looked at. And let's not forget the epic soundtrack here too, composed by longtime Grasshopper manufacturer collaborator Akira Yamaoka, best known for the Silent Hill soundtracks, and my personal favorite, the Shadow of the Dam music. It's a much more understated score this time around than he usually does, but adds a ton of atmosphere to the grim story and settings. And even though this review is based on the original version of this game, you can also pick up the 2017 Sine Mora EX on all modern consoles and play the definitive version of this future classic. This for me is also another great entry-level shooter for newbies to the genre, so please give it a go. It's an amazing game that will continually wow you from chapter to chapter, guaranteed. And that's a wrap today for the first episode of Shoot 'em Up Decades. I hope you enjoyed it. The 3 games we showed, I hope it showed the variety of the shoot 'em up genre in general. Most people think the shoot 'em up genre is just one-toned, but it really isn't. There's a lot of different styles of gameplay involved. And thanks for joining me, B at 64K. I hope you enjoyed this first episode of Shoot 'em Up Decades. If you could like and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. And cut to credits.